Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here today and continuing to cover our response to Hurricane Ida and as well as the COVID issues and so forth. Today I'm joined by Dr. Joe Canner with the Department of Health, and he'll speak to you in a few minutes. And because of requests that were made previously, I also have Chip Klein here from the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority to talk a little bit about the dewatering operations and the performance of our protection systems and the durability of those systems with respect to any damage that may have been done. Secretary Ardoin briefed me this past Tuesday on the upcoming fall elections, and based upon that conversation and upon his certification to me yesterday that holding the elections as currently scheduled would impair the integrity of the elections, and based on numerous issues related to displaced voters and election day personnel, as well as extensive power outages and damage to early voting and election day polling places, and just the sheer difficulty, if not impossibility, of meeting many of the pre-election deadlines that are set forth in law in multiple parishes. I did sign an executive order today to reschedule the upcoming fall elections. So the elections that would have been held on October the 9th will now be held on November 13th. And the general elections for runoffs that would have been held on November 13th will now be held on December the 11th. So this basically functioned as a 1-month delay to both the primary and the general elections as they were previously scheduled. Early voting is also rescheduled for both election dates. The first early voting period will be held October 30th through November the 6th, except for Sunday, October 31st. And the second early voting period will be held November 27th through December 4th, except for Sunday, November 28th. I encourage anyone with questions to visit the Secretary of State's website for any additional information that you may need or for clarification, and that's sos.la.gov, or you can go to GoVote, G-E-A-U-X, vote.com. Unfortunately, yesterday we reported 11 additional storm-related deaths, all of which came from Orleans Parish. Obviously, any loss of life is tragic and sad, and when you see 11 at one time, it is especially so. 9 of the 11 deaths were heat-related. 2 came from carbon monoxide poisoning. And although the report came yesterday, the deaths actually occurred over many days since the storm came onto land. That brings the total normal number, I should say, of storm-related deaths to 26. And Dr. Cantor is going to speak in a moment on heat and generator safety, but I want to remind everyone to please be careful in these hazardous conditions. And make sure that you're not just careful for yourself and your family, but please check on your neighbors, especially those who are older, those who have underlying health conditions, or anyone with special needs. While much progress has been made, there's still a significant number of people without power. The Public Service Commission is reporting 271,718 power outages remaining in Louisiana. Now, the good news is that's about 75% restoration of the 1.1 million outages that were reported at the peak. But if you're one of those 271,000 households, and really those are households and businesses, then we know that that has not been available to you yet, and we're going to continue to work as fast as we can to speed relief. Not just the power restoration, but all of the things that you need, whether it's food, water, ice, so forth, until that power is restored. As of this morning, there were 3,056 people being sheltered in 19 different shelters across the state of Louisiana. You may remember I had the Secretary Marquita Walters of the Department of Children and Family Services here the other day and she explained the DSNAP process. It is in progress, and although it is not required in order to participate in DSNAP, we are encouraging impacted residents to pre-register for DSNAP, and you do that on the DCFS website at dcfs.la.gov/DSNAP. You can also text LA DSNAP to 898-211 for more information. And as she said, there's a sequence to DSNAP. The first thing we do is we engage in the points of distribution, but also the disaster household distribution for food, and those things are ongoing. And then once that assistance ends, power is restored, stores come back online and have stocked shelves. That's when you do DSNAP. And it always happens several weeks after the storm passes. And there will be more to follow on exactly when the DSNAP program will commence. I can tell you it will be done virtually as it was done last year. Including EMAC and Title 10 forces, Title 10 being active duty forces and EMAC being soldiers and airmen sent in from the National Guards of other states. There are currently 8,835 service members activated in support of current operations in Louisiana. The Louisiana National Guard has assessed more than 5,200 miles of roadway and have cleared more than 2,900 miles of roadway across 20 parishes. Today, the National Guard is operating 68 points of distribution in 13 parishes, and to date they have distributed right at 4.75 million meals, more than 208,000 tarps, which, by the way, is a record. Never before have these many tarps been given out. Almost 6 million liters of water have been distributed, more than 815,000 bags of ice, and 250,000 sandbags. I can report that the first blue roof was installed yesterday in Orleans Parish. We're showing currently more than 48,000 households registered for this program. Additional parishes have been added to the list of those eligible to participate in the program. So if your parish did not qualify before, it may now, and basically every parish that had previously been approved for individual assistance has now been approved for participation in the Blue Roof program. And I'm going to go through those parishes because you may not remember what those IA parishes were. They were Ascension, Assumption, East Baton Rouge, East Feliciana, Iberia, Iberville, Jefferson, Lafourche, Livingston, Orleans, Plaquemines, Point Capee, St. Bernard, St. Charles, St. Helena, St. James, St. John the Baptist, St. Martin, St. Mary, St. Tammany, Tangipahoa, Terrebonne, Washington, West Baton Rouge, and West Feliciana. We thank FEMA and the Corps of Engineers for assessing these additional parishes and making the determination that they can and should participate in the Blue Roof program. You do have to register. I encourage you to do that if your roof sustained damage. Remember, the Blue Roof has to render your home habitable so that it can be lived in. But if you've got any questions, please register. You can do that by going to blueroof.us. Blueroof.us. The Department of Transportation has cleared 535 shoulder miles and removed 48,706 cubic yards of debris. The debris process and the status can be viewed at 511la.org. So the same site we ask you to go to check and see about road closures and road conditions and so forth, you can go there and look at the status of debris operations as well. State offices will be closed in the following 12 parishes tomorrow, September the 10th, through Sunday, September the 12th. Those 12 parishes are Jefferson, Lafourche, Orleans, Plaquemines, St. Bernard, St. Charles, St. Helena, St. James, St. John the Baptist, St. Tammany, Tangipahoa, and Terrebonne. I'll give a brief update on COVID and with respect to testing and vaccinations before I turn it over to Dr. Canada. Our Shot for 100 program for college students is getting back up and running as students go back onto campuses and classes resume, at least in-person classes and so forth. I can tell you just shy of 5,000 of those $100 cards have been activated across 9 regions of the state thus far. Community-based COVID test sites and community-based vaccination sites are now open in all regions of the state, including Region 3, which covers Assumption, Lafourche, St. Charles, St. James, St. John, St. Mary, and Terrebonne parishes. And while we're talking about vaccinations, we have completed just shy of 2 million full vaccinations in Louisiana. That is 42.6% of our population is fully vaccinated. And in terms of those who are actually eligible to be vaccinated, those who are 12 and older, we just surpassed 50% of our state's population. And so obviously I want to thank the people of Louisiana who have decided to be vaccinated, and I do appreciate it. The numbers are improving, but it is also true we have a very long way to go. So at this time, I'm going to ask Dr. Cantor to come up, then not Dr. Klein, but Chip Klein's going to come up to talk about the coastal systems, and then I'm going to come back up with an additional announcement, and then I will take your questions as well. Dr. Cantor?
Good afternoon, Governor. On behalf of Secretary Phillips, we thank you for your leadership, as always. To start by just brief reminder that there remain a lot of families throughout Louisiana that have had massive disruption in their lives and livelihoods, and we continue to offer our support in any way that we can, although it is getting better day by day. I can tell you today we were able to take a number of water systems off of boil advisories. So right now we're standing at 25 water systems which are complete outages, 10 of which are larger community systems. That's down from a max of 228. And those 25 systems represent about 42,000 individuals. There are now 152 water systems currently under a boil water advisory. That's down from a max of 231. And that represents 460,000 individuals. Both of those numbers came down significantly today, so we're looking forward to continued progress on that, but still 460,000 people are not with full services of the water system, and that's a hardship on them without question. As the governor had mentioned, we continue to focus on preventable causes of post-storm fatalities. I want to talk a little bit about the biggest ones there. We're at 26 storm-related deaths right now. We consider a death to be storm-related if, in the respective coroner's estimation, the death reasonably would not have occurred had it not been for the storm or ensuing events. It's always the coroner that makes that determination. We simply compile that list and report it out. 11 of those deaths were added yesterday from Orleans Parish, 9 of which were electricity and heat related, 2 of which were carbon monoxide related. So if you tally it up right now, those 26, 6 are related to carbon monoxide poisoning connected to unsafe generator usage. 1 is the result of a tree falling on an individual during a storm. 2 were related to drownings. 5 were connected to the 7 nursing homes that evacuated to Independence. 10 are related to power outages within the New Orleans area. 1 is specifically related to an oxygen outage, and 1 was an individual who fell from a roof. And to put this a little bit in comparison, for the entire 2020-2021 hurricane season, last year's hurricane season, we had 42 deaths, storm-related deaths during that season, 9 of which were carbon monoxide related, and another 9 of which were heat related. If using a generator, and again, after hearing the update from the governor, we anticipate fewer and fewer families needing to use a generator going forward, and that's encouraging. But if you still are relying on a generator, always outdoors, always well away from your house, and particularly away from any air intakes on your house, those being windows, doors, or AC vents, and always in conjunction with a functioning carbon monoxide detector in your home, ideally more than one in your home. If you do not have those 3 elements in place, you are not operating that generator in a manner that's safe for your family, and you're at risk. I'll remind you that carbon monoxide poisoning is so scary because it's so quick, you can die in 10 minutes, and it's so silent, odorless, tasteless, it gives absolutely no warning, and we usually, when we have an instance of this, it's usually not just one person in the house that's affected, it's usually the entire house, with very little warning, if any. So please be humble in operating a generator. Please recognize how dangerous it can be, always outside, always well away from the house, and always in conjunction with functioning carbon monoxide detectors that are inside your house. Separately, in terms of heat-related injuries, we got a little bit of a reprieve with the weather right now. We think it's going to be a little bit more moderate throughout the weekend, but then next week it's going to get hot again. So, if you still have yard work to do, if you're still working on your house, as the heat picks back up, please be cognizant of that. Please be, humble in your own ability. It's not worth putting yourself at risk. Take breaks, try and work early in the morning, later in the afternoon, so you avoid the midday sun, and stay hydrated, and take a break if you're feeling exhausted. We see these heat-related events after every storm, and we really do consider these to be preventable. One additional item that I do want to bring to people's radar is West Nile virus. We usually see this come up after storms every year. We certainly have in the past, and we're beginning to see increases now. So this is due to increases in mosquito breeding relating to standard water that occurs after a storm. We've had 5 cases of neuroinvasive disease related to West Nile this season. Neuroinvasive disease is the most feared complication of West Nile. It can be fatal. Oftentimes when it's not fatal, it leads to permanent disability. One of those is new this week. As of this morning, and I received word coming into this press conference that we now have 3 more cases of neuroinvasive disease to report. So if those get confirmed, it'll bring the season total up to 8 cases. The 5 cases that were confirmed as of this morning are from the parishes of Beauregard, East Baton Rouge, Livingston, Orleans, and Ouachita. But those are just the cases that we know about that cause neuroinvasive disease. We know that there's West Nile mosquito activity in terms of we have cultured it or lab positive off of mosquito traps in at least 21 parishes right now, probably more. So it's a widespread problem. There's aggressive and robust mosquito abatement operations going on in the affected parishes right now. Those will continue. There are some things that you can and should do on your own, particularly if you're in an affected parish. Number 1 is protect yourself. And by that I mean when the mosquitoes are out, wear long sleeves, wear bug repellent, and if you don't have to be outside, if you have the AC working, go inside. Limit your exposure to mosquitoes and use repellent as you can. The second thing you can do is to help reduce the places where mosquitoes can breed. These are water-breeding mosquitoes, and they're typically called container mosquitoes. They breed in very small amounts of standing water. And it doesn't have to be any larger than a bottle cap that's overturned and filled with rainwater to have a breeding ground. When you have a breeding ground, you have more mosquitoes in your home. Nobody wants that. So take a moment every few days. This is good practice anytime in the summertime here. Take a few moments every few days to go around your property and overturn any standing water. Typical culprits are the saucers below potted plants, lawn equipment, and debris. And again, it can be as little bit as a bottle cap that breeds mosquitoes. So any standing water, even small amounts on your property, if you overturn that and do that regularly, you'll keep breeding grounds for these mosquitoes to a minimum, reduce the amount of mosquitoes that are causing you and your family problems. We've had, as the governor said, 26 deaths so far connected to Hurricane Ida. I do have to note that since Hurricane Ida made landfall, we've had 633 deaths related to COVID. At least that's as many as we've reported out publicly. So the COVID threat remains as real as it ever has. And I want to take a few minutes reviewing where we're at because it's been a week or two since we've talked about this. In short, we're going in the right direction, and that's encouraging. But the level of COVID out there remains exorbitantly high. There remains a lot of risk right now, although we're encouraged that it does appear that we peaked in this dangerous fourth surge connected to Delta, and our numbers are now going in the right direction. Currently, we have 1,825 hospitalized COVID patients throughout the state. That's about a 40% reduction from the time that the governor reinstituted the mask mandate. And as we've talked about before, we're thankful that we experienced that, because had we not had that 40% reduction when Ida hit, it would have made responding to this storm that much more complicated. Percent positivity for this week has gone down from 14.1 the last time we reported publicly to 11.3%. All 64 parishes remain in the highest category of community transmission risk. The CDC gives 4 categories. All 64 parishes remain in the high category, and that's even with the disruption of testing. There's no doubt that we've had a decreased volume of testing over the past couple of weeks. It's actually been down 45% over the past 2 weeks. Even with that decrease in testing volume, we still have all 64 parishes in the highest risk category. We did, unfortunately, over the past 2 weeks, add 29 new cases of multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children. That brings that total to 229. Of those 29 new cases, 2 were fatalities, and 3 of those individuals remain in the ICU in critical condition. We continue to offer monoclonal antibody treatment. This is the treatment available to people after they've been diagnosed with COVID but not yet sick enough to be in the hospital, designed to keep people out of the hospital. This past week, we gave about 4,400 doses of monoclonal antibody treatment. It's available right now at 137 sites. So just like before the storm, if you are diagnosed with COVID, you should immediately call your healthcare provider and have a conversation if monoclonal antibodies would be indicated and appropriately in you. They're effective at keeping people out of the hospital. They're not a silver bullet, but they are effective at reducing the need for hospitalization, meaning keeping you from getting sicker with COVID. Testing sites are coming back online from the disruption in the storm. There's about 30 community testing sites available right now. There'll be more in the coming days. There's about 20 community vaccine sites available, plus all the private vaccine sites, meaning pharmacies, clinics, and hospitals. If you deferred your second dose of Moderna or Pfizer because of the storm, that's okay. That's absolutely okay. Just get it rescheduled and get it done whenever you can. You do not need to restart the series. So if you missed your second dose appointment, that's completely okay and understandable. Reschedule it as soon as you can. I do want to before I close, just mention one other item, and this is regarding mental health. I think, you know, it's important. We pride ourselves on being resilient in Louisiana, and we are. That doesn't mean it's not challenging. It doesn't mean it doesn't take a toll. And I'm talking about individuals and families who are dealing with the stress of the storm. I'm talking about first responders, or people who are involved in the response effort. And I'm talking about people who might think they're first responders, given what they've done for their communities, friends and neighbors. This is challenging and traumatic stuff, and we should not blow that off. I'm going to give two resources now that I really would like people to keep on hand. One is a hotline. This is operated by the Office of Behavioral Health. It's the Keep Calm hotline. It's 866-310-7977. I'll say that again, 866-310-7977. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 100% free, 100% confidential. You can talk to a counselor. No one else has to know about that. The other is a text hotline. This is operated by SAMHSA, the federal agency. It's their national disaster distress hotline, and you text "talk with us," one word, "talk with us," to 66746. Again, free, 24 hours a day, 100% confidential. Let's not kid ourselves. This is hard, and despite being good and experienced with it, it's still hard. And I encourage anyone who is feeling stressed by the situation to proactively call or encourage your loved ones to do so. It's never a sign of weakness, always appropriate to talk to someone about these very challenging issues. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. Chip Klein, Executive Assistant to the Governor and CPRA Board Chairman. I'm going to provide a brief update on how our various levee protection projects and the various hurricane risk reduction systems performed throughout southeast Louisiana during Hurricane Ida. And I want to begin by saying that you will recall, as Hurricane Ida was approaching South Louisiana, that this storm was going to test our levee systems in a way they haven't been tested before. And that statement certainly proved to be true as a result of this storm. But the fact is that our levees held. The investments that we have made across South Louisiana made a tremendous difference for the people that live in southeast Louisiana in protecting them against one of the strongest storms to ever hit our state. And so in the hurricane risk reduction system around the greater New Orleans area, it's safe to say that that $14 billion system literally paid for itself with the damages that it prevented from happening as a result of the storm. It is my belief that this was the system's first true test. This is only the second time since it's been completed that the system was fully closed, that it was fully operational. All components of the system were operational. The first time was actually in Hurricane Barry. But this system performed exactly how we hoped it would and exactly how we needed it to. No levee overtopping, no levee failures, no levee breaches. So a very different picture on the ground today after Hurricane Ida compared to the picture we saw on the ground following Hurricane Katrina. And that is thanks to the federal investment of $14 billion around the greater New Orleans area. But I also think it's important for the public to know that there have been billions of dollars invested in other hurricane risk reduction systems across South Louisiana, particularly in Terrebonne and Lafourche parishes. And I want to start with the Larose to Golden Meadow system, which protects portions of South Lafourche. This is actually the levee protection system that had our attention the most, I think, based upon the trajectory of the storm, based upon some of the storm surge modeling that we were seeing. This system withstood a 16-foot storm surge in South Lafourche. There were no levee failures. There were no levee breaches. We've gotten reports from the South Lafourche Levee District and Lafourche Parish that there was no overtopping on the Larose to Golden Meadow system. And so that system along with the hurricane risk reduction system in New Orleans, did exactly what we needed to do, protect those populated areas in the southern portion of Lafourche. Now, on Morganza to the Gulf. Morganza to the Gulf protects other areas in Lafourche and large portions of Terrebonne Parish. It protects about 250,000 people in those two parishes. I will say that that project was authorized in 1992, and there's been over $1 billion worth of state and local money invested into that system. And so what you saw happen in Terrebonne Parish as a result of the shift of the storm to the east and the strong wind and the direction of the wind from Hurricane Ida is you saw storm surge stacking up within the hurricane risk reduction system in Terrebonne Parish. So the floodgates that are in that system, they are designed to keep water out, not to keep water in. And as a result of that prolonged, sustained, strong northerly wind, we had water stack up against the inside portions of some of those floodgates, particularly on the Bubba Dove floodgate, which is on the Houma Navigation Canal in Terrebonne Parish. It's one of the larger floodgates in that system. And as a result of that surge stacking up, it causes the hinge to snap off of that floodgate. It did not become completely dislodged. It was able to stay in place, but there was a gap in the protection system there. It did allow for water to flow out, but as a result of the amount of water, the velocity of water that was flowing through that gap, we had a significant scouring happen on the bottom of that channel. And we need a certain amount of sediment, a certain amount of bed load in that channel to actually close that floodgate and sink it to provide the protection that it is needed. So we're working very closely with Terrebonne Parish, the Terrebonne Levee District, to put some emergency temporary measures in place so that we can ensure that the areas in Terrebonne Parish, particularly the populated areas in Terrebonne Parish, continue to be protected. You also saw similar situations on the Petit Caillou floodgate, the Bush Canal floodgate, as well as the Placid floodgate. Now, those floodgates were not damaged structurally, but you did see the electrical systems that operate the dewatering pumps on those floodgates go out. And so those repairs are taking place now. And the reason why those electrical systems are important on those floodgates is what allows them to open and close and to dewater. Those floodgates are now in an open position. We're hoping to get those electrical systems prepared before another storm would come toward that area. We continue to be reminded about just how vulnerable the river parishes are, particularly St. John, St. Charles, and St. James parishes. There is a $760 million levee protection system that is fully funded. We did a groundbreaking on that project last month. And so we're going to be working with the Corps of Engineers and our congressional delegation to look for ways in which we can expedite the construction timeline on that project, as well as looking at extending that alignment into portions of St. James Parish and also adding some additional flood protection features to that project as well. In Plaquemines Parish, New Orleans to Venice, again, no overtopping. The federal investment there performed as we needed it to. You did see overtopping of back levees, parish-owned and maintained levees on the west bank of Plaquemines Parish near Myrtle Grove and Alliance, as well as on the east bank in the St. Bernard areas. As you heard the governor say in his opening comments, CPRA is focused on some dewatering missions in those areas. There's been 22 cuts on back levees on the west bank of Plaquemines Parish to help allow that water to get out quickly, which will allow for Highway 23 to open to traffic. I want to make a few comments, if I could, on Grand Isle and Lafitte. Yesterday I was able to join the governor in both of those areas. A sobering sight to see. And I want the people of Lafitte and Grand Isle to know that this governor and the state's coastal program are not going to forget about those areas. And we are still committed to providing the protection they need and deserve. However, with that being said, we have got to fundamentally change the way in which we are thinking about protecting those areas, particularly Grand Isle. Sand dunes on the Gulf side of the island and segmented breakwaters are not going to cut it. So we're going to be working with the Corps of Engineers and our congressional delegation to look at new strategies on how we can provide better protection, more resilient protection and strengthen structures around Grand Isle and Lafitte. And finally, I want to give a quick update on some of our coastal restoration projects. Many of you who follow the coastal program know that there's been significant investment in coastal restoration over the last several years. A lot of people in the general public say those are great investments, but they're going to be washed away when the next hurricane comes. But that is not what we see on the ground today. We have had eyes on the ground on Queen Bess, the Caminada Headland Project, which is the largest coastal restoration project constructed to date, the Caminada Back Barrier Marsh, and some of the barrier islands that have recently finished construction in the Terrebonne Barrier Island chain, Trinity East, Timbalier, West Grand Terre, and West Bell Headland. With a storm of this magnitude, obviously there's going to be issues that need to be addressed on some of those coastal restoration projects. But we know that those restoration projects, number one, knocked down the storm surge, it slowed the surge, and number two, they proved to be sustainable. So for those of us that work in the coastal program, we're going to continue the multiple lines of defense strategy that's called for in the Coastal Master Plan. Restoring our barrier islands, restoring our marshes, our ecosystems, because the natural buffer protects the systems that help protect us. And so I don't know if I'm taking questions, Governor, or if I'm turning it back over to you, but happy to take questions at the end if you have any.
Thank you, Chip and Dr. Cantor. Again, before I take some questions, and we're going to take questions for me or for Dr. Cantor, for Chip at the end, I do want to end on a positive note. A Hurricane Ida Relief Fund has been established in partnership with several community foundations across southeast Louisiana. It will raise and distribute relief assistance in the form of grants to those organizations and nonprofits that are working directly with those who've been impacted by the storm. The fund prioritizes both immediate response and long-term recovery needs of the affected areas. And as you all know, the nonprofit community can often move at speeds that government can't move at, and it can fund things that, quite frankly, we can't, things that are very essential. The community foundations partnering in this effort are the Greater New Orleans Foundation, the Bayou Community Foundation in Houma, the North Shore Community Foundation in Covington, and the Baton Rouge Area Foundation. All of those foundations together include all of the parishes that were impacted by the storm. The Baton Rouge Area Foundation is the fiscal agent for the Hurricane Ida Relief and Recovery Fund. Each of the participating community foundations has been successfully fundraising for their own Hurricane Ida relief funds, and they're going to continue to raise money through those campaigns to maximize the overall amount of philanthropic funds that to be secured. But I'm asking for individuals, for businesses here in Louisiana, around the country, to be very generous, and please make donations to idaresponse.org. It's idaresponse.org. Donations to the fund are tax deductible. Tomorrow, I do intend to travel again, hopefully down to Terrebonne Parish, for example, and I think we're going to try to make ourselves available to the press again on that trip for a short press availability tomorrow afternoon. We'll give you more information about that shortly. And with that, we will take some questions. Yes, sir.
And you said the 50% vaccination rate of the eligible population, is that fully vaccinated?
Yes, sir.
And,
Well, that's yes. Yes. Sure.
I think so, yeah. I think that we had this very dangerous Delta surge, and there's never one metric that you look at 100%. You try and take in cases or incidents, percent positivity, COVID-like illness coming into emergency departments, and hospitalizations. When you look at it in totality, it does appear that we peaked maybe a week or so, maybe even 2 weeks prior to the storm. Our hospitalization peak was on or about August 17th. And we've had about a 40% reduction since that time. I think the challenge here is, given the disruption that this storm presented us, there's no guarantee that we continue on this downward trajectory. We're thankful we are on a downward trajectory, but this storm created a disruption in families. It caused families to be in close proximity to people that they normally wouldn't otherwise be, whether that's in a shelter environment, in an evacuation environment, or even if a family is staying with their neighbor who happens to have power or happens to have a generator. So the message here is, while we're encouraged that we're going in the right direction, we want to do everything we can to keep that so. And that means staying vigilant. It means continue to mask, continue to distance, and ultimately, if you've not yet chosen to get vaccinated, to do that now. We want to continue the progress we're on and certainly protect against the possibility of future increases.
Also, on the positive rate, you said it went from 14.1 to
11.3%. And that's on the dashboard right now, too. The CDC has a four-class community transmission risk categorization. It looks at two measures. It looks at percent positivity of all tests being conducted, and it looks at incidence, or the number of new cases diagnosed day on day. It takes those two measures and gives a rubric for community transmission risk. Essentially, if you were to go out and about normal daily life, how risky is it? What's your likelihood of being exposed to COVID? So point being, although we're going in the right direction and we're encouraged about that, the risk of community transmission remains as high as the CDC offers in each of 64 parishes. Yeah, Melinda.
Before you walk away, I wanted to
Okay.
the non-heat-related deaths that were reported from the Orleans Parish coroner yesterday, do you know if those are primarily in those senior living centers? Because there were obviously a lot of reports about the conditions there and some preliminary reports about deaths of residents there. So is that where those deaths come from?
I can't say definitively because it really is the coroner that says that. I can tell you of those 9, some were in those facilities, amongst the ones that I think already got reported in the media, and some were not.
Okay, and then on the subject of the nursing home evacuations, can you talk globally about the preparations that nursing homes had in place in advance of this storm, and whether you think they were sufficient, and whether you think that the state has done enough to stay on top of evacuation plans and those sorts of preparations that the nursing homes make?
Yeah, and I mean, I'll just preface it by saying I think this is going to be an ongoing, it should, be an ongoing conversation. There's a series of laws that were passed, following Katrina, where the experience was that, some nursing homes didn't have any evacuation plan at all. Some didn't have a pre-identified place of where they would go to, and some didn't have any pre-identified way of getting there. And so there was a law and then some subsequent rules passed to address that. And so nursing homes are required to submit annually a plan to their respective parish and a summary of that plan to the Department of Health. And those get reviewed and verified. I think clearly there's more that has to be done. There's absolutely no question about that, and it's not just from this instance, although that's a big part of it. Clearly there's more that needs to be done, and I think we look forward to having that conversation. And whether it's more robust laws or something else, I think we're all looking forward to contributing that conversation, because there's always more that we can do, every aspect of this to protect what really are amongst the most vulnerable people. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Yes, ma'am.
In terms of temporary housing, that's obviously going to be an issue, particularly in the Terrebonne and Matouche areas. Are you already in conversations
Yeah, and so, first of all, it's a timely question because yesterday 2 individuals came in from FEMA in Washington and started working with Tony Robinson and John Long, who you've met from FEMA, but also with GOSEP, looking at the larger picture, I should say, as it relates to housing. And of course, FEMA is the federal agency that looks at the temporary housing piece. HUD, Housing and Urban Development, will look at the permanent piece if and when there's a disaster appropriation that includes IDA, which we are working very hard with the White House and with congressional leadership, and particularly our delegation, to try to make that happen sooner rather than later. But those conversations are ongoing, and there are things right now that FEMA's done to assist. There are components of individual assistance that help. There's rental assistance, the temporary shelter assistance. So for example, I'm sorry, I said temporary. It's transitional shelter assistance, and these basically allow for lodging in hotels, which is ideal in the short term at least, because that's kind of like a non-congregant setting, and it's much safer in our COVID environment. We talk about shelters. I told you a while ago there are about 3,000 people across 18 shelters. Well, there are 11,000 households that are using the transitional sheltering assistance, and that's actually more than 31,000 people. So that's very helpful. But those things are immediate and not robust enough, and so there are additional conversations happening. And I can't get ahead of that because ultimately FEMA has to approve what's going to happen. But I believe we're going to see, and you're going to hear announcements over the coming days of additional options. They're going to be brought to bear, and you've seen them all before, and all of those are in discussion now. Whether it looks like trailer parks, trailers in people's driveways, something not quite like, but similar to the program that we did after the 2016 floods, where we went into people's homes and made temporary repairs that were designed to get those homes deemed safe, habitable, and secure. And we called that the Shelter at Home program. It was a version of the STEP program that's run by FEMA, and all of those discussions are underway right now, and I believe you're going to see some more information forthcoming on that relatively soon. Yes, sir. I hate to do this. I need you to repeat all those questions. I couldn't understand any of them.
Is this better?
Yeah, I think so.
So yeah, I was asking about the recent review report that came out today that said that 67% of state officers use force against black people in the state. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't have a comment on that. I don't know whether that's accurate or not. What I can tell you is that with the leadership we have in the state police, that I am confident that robust measures have been put in place in terms of new leadership, both in the command group, but also at the various troops. I know that new policies have been put into place all around additional transparency and making sure that those things do not continue. And I know that Colonel Davis is going to be addressing this tomorrow, I think at 1 p.m., and there'll be more information at that point in time. Yes, ma'am. For Chip? I would hope so, because he's here because of your question the other day.
Yes, ma'am.
So a couple things, when you talk about the dewatering that is going on, it's got to be broader than just Plaquemine Parish.
It is.
Talk to me about where there are still bodies of water that need to be burned.
I appreciate the prompt there, Melinda, because I left out Lafitte. So Lafitte was completely inundated with surge from all sides. So there's areas in lower Lafitte and in the areas of Barataria that we have, I think, 28 pumps on the ground right now that are facilitating the drainage and the dewatering of those areas. Jefferson Parish did make 2 additional levee cuts on back levees there to help facilitate additional drainage there. But primarily, our main focus over the next several days is going to be Lafitte, West Bank of Plaquemines Parish, and areas outside of levee protection in St. Bernard. Now, obviously, immediately following the hurricane, we had dewatering efforts in northern parts of Lafourche that are outside of the levee protection systems there. We had to move pumps from St. Mary Parish to the Louisiana Offshore Oil Port, which took on water. We're helping dewater that facility. I believe we had some dewatering efforts in southern Terrebonne, which the governor mentioned that we're going to be going there tomorrow. But primarily over the next several days, dewatering is going to be West Bank of Plaquemines, St. Bernard, and Lafitte.
And in terms of the repairs to the floodgate in Terrebonne, what's the estimated timeline of having something in place so that they can be protected from whatever might come?
So we are working right now. We've got a contractor on site looking at the feasibility of either dropping rocks at the bottom of that channel to address the scour hole or putting sand. It may be a combination of both. But that contractor is on site now, and hopefully we'll have a timeline by the end of the day on the measures that it's going to take to make sure that we can close that structure, secure it in place in the event that another storm is coming. That was if you're referring, Melinda, if you're referring to that was on the hinge on the Bubba Dove, but on the electrical panel, that should be repaired in short order. So I don't think that's as an extensive of a repair job as the broken hinge on the Bubba Dove. Taking your notes.
Okay, anything else? Well, thank you all for continuing to cover this, and look, it is not lost on anybody here at the state level, and certainly not on our local partners, just how many people continue to suffer because of the aftermath of Hurricane Ida. And while things are getting better, and we can be thankful for that, especially with the restoration of electricity, it appears that the fuel situation is getting much better, the communication situation is getting much better. But in those areas of our state, in the southeast Louisiana, that were most heavily impacted, that sustained the most damage, the damage to those transmission lines and distribution systems has been very, very extensive, and to homes and businesses. This is going to be a very long-term recovery, but that doesn't mean that we're going to wait before we try to seek additional assistance, whether it's for temporary measures or for permanent measures. All of those conversations are happening with the administration in Washington, with congressional leadership, our delegation, and we certainly continue to have conversations with local leaders every single day. And in fact, they are our partners. I told you how many commodities have been distributed by the National Guard. Every single meal has gone to where the parishes tell us they need it. Every single tarp, every single liter of water, every pod that opens, every generator that goes out goes to where they tell us they need them the most. And that's the kind of partnership that's going to continue. But we know that despite all of the very good work, all of the very best efforts, and our effort to speed this relief to everybody, that there are many families out there who are still really hurting. And I hate that. My heart aches for everybody, but I just want you to know we are going to continue to work every single day to make improvement. And we are going to get through this. I am asking you to understand that we are still relatively early in this hurricane season. Another storm could come, so put yourself and your family in the best possible position to withstand that. Make sure that you are being a good neighbor in terms of looking after those who may be older. They may have special needs. Please see what you can do for them. And then, as always, I believe in the power of prayer, so we can lift one another up in prayer as well. And it's hard at times like this to offer prayers of thanksgiving. But there are many ways that all of us have been blessed. And so we can do that as well as prayers of petition, and those are much easier in times like this. So thank you all very much. Again, I hope to see some of you, or at least some members of the press tomorrow on the trip to Terrebonne Parish, and we'll get more information to you about that later. Thank you, ma'am.